I wanted to make a recording for test number 2 for our Foundations of Math Reasoning course, which is Math 0309, and this is our second test in the spring of 2019. I want to start with a page from when we originally taught this course about making the most of studying. I have uploaded this page to your document sharing in my math lab, and I just want to point out a few things or highlight some things on this page. The first being making the most of your time. Right here where it says don't study, oops, didn't mean to do that. Don't study for more than 45 minutes at a time. And I'm not going to read all of these, you can read these, but some highlights being recognize when you're becoming frustrated, tired, hungry, etc. And then plan your study time strategically. There are more pieces that I'm not reading, but I just want to point out some more thoughts, like the moral of the story that I skipped over is that redistributing your study time can really increase your learning and your retention. Also, I encourage you to make the most of getting help. And so in this first bullet, second line, you should always prepare before you seek help by reviewing the material and attempting the work. And don't wait to get help. Don't expect someone to just show you how to do it. This method doesn't help you learn. And if someone's doing it for you, you need to get help from somewhere else. So also on this page, oh, it only shows one page. I gotta go get the other page. I'll be right back. So on page 2, the top bullet talks about asking about concepts and not just show me the steps. It's important, but if you have a conceptual understanding, the learning will be deeper. Also on this next bullet, remember that there is a social and an emotional side to learning, and it mentions some information there. Also make the most of what you study. You want to focus your study time on the concepts that you need to learn better, but first you got to assess your understanding. What do you know and what do you not know? So self-assessment requires honesty. It's easy and tempting to fool ourselves into thinking that we really know more than what we really know. And so this brings up the list of the sure, I really know it, cop-outs. Some interesting comments here. I think we've all either said them or heard them. But down here, if you were depending on someone else to do something for you, you would expect them to really prove that they can do it. And you've got to demand the same thing of yourself. And so here are some ideas to help you avoid the cop-outs trap. And you see those listed there. Again, this is all posted in your document sharing in my math lab. And the final page talks about making the most of sleep to allow your brain time to grow the connections. I know we're all very busy. We have jobs, family obligations, and other requirements in life, but do try to make the most of your sleep. So that's talking about how to prepare for any exam or how to study. I want to specifically ask you to look at this resource, which is the Review Yourself for Exam 2. You do need to pull our calendar for this semester, and you do need to look at what is on test number 2. The information you see here from your resource, it's great, lots of great information. I want to point out this piece here. Our test this semester is from 5B to 9D. So the information you have here could be part of the assessment mentioned earlier about how to prepare for a test. When you look through these concepts, it gives you an idea of information that you know sort of well, know really well, or ones that you're just not even remembering at all from class. So looking through this page can give you an idea of where to start your study and then plan what to do over the next few days. You can start by looking at this first section for one night of study and the second section for another night of study, or you can go by lessons, like start with what we did in lesson 5 for one night and lesson 6. You need to make a plan and then do everything you can to protect the plan, like asking people to help with childcare or asking for reduced hours from work the next week. Whatever it is that you can do to protect that time, and then to have self-discipline to use that time. So I would look through here, like when it says comparing data expressed in different forms, that's from 8A and 8B. That's not on this test. But calculate absolute and relative change, 8C and 8D, that is on this test. So again, this is a second piece of information in preparing for our upcoming Test 2 in our Math 0309 class. So now I encourage you to get your in-class student notebook, the pages, the lessons that we've worked on in class, and maybe sticky notes, highlighters, pens, pencils, anything that you want to take notes on. And we're going to go through here and look at some items that can be on our next test. Again, it's 5B to 9D, and it's going to include proportions and dimensional analysis. So when preparing for a test, look through the items that we went through in class, especially when you see vocabulary words or words in bold, like what is frequency and what is relative frequency. In class, we did a tally, and remember, it's during a test, so how much I can ask you to do is limited. I could ask you to do a tally, but more likely I'm going to ask you to interpret frequency and relative frequency on a tally or a chart that's already been completed. Make sure you understand relative frequency and how to use this. And I'll just keep scrolling down, and this is a great plan to do for any of your classes, because then when we got to 5C, we had more examples of frequency, more examples tying the frequency into a graph, which is a histogram. Can you read a histogram? Could you create a histogram? Could you create a histogram using relative frequencies? Because we did both. And so anything that we've done at least a couple of times in class or spent 2 whole lessons on, that's really important. So make sure you could not only read and understand or create a histogram using frequencies, but also, as we did on number 3, to create a histogram using relative frequencies. Continuing on in our scroll through our lessons, can you create a dot plot if I give you information? Can you read a dot plot? You need to know how to do both. Can you describe a dot plot? We used words in class like symmetry and normal distribution, right tail and left tailed skew. We talked about our writing principles. Could you write what we call a fluffy sentence to make it very descriptive for someone not even looking at your work? They would just be reading what you wrote and they may not be able to see the graph. We talked about stem and leaf. On question number 4, the key is right here, and then we talked about if we turn this sideways, it looks like a histogram in that we could draw it as a normal curve. It's very, very steep, and also take in some words to the test to describe. Steep, bunched up. We had a lot of great words in class that I'd asked you to write down, so I'd go back and look at those. And how would you describe the shape? And moving on, we did not do lesson 6A, so it won't be on the test. We did not do lesson 6B, so it will not be on the test. But on 6C, we didn't actually do the lesson, but we practiced the concepts. So if you look here at the objectives for this lesson, the first one being, can you calculate a mean? Can you calculate a median? And can you identify the mode? Then, could you also interpret them? I've got a mean, what does it mean? I've got a median, what does it mean? Etc. So the preview and the practice work you did, getting ready for and after 6C, will be very beneficial for the test. We did do 6C where we created a box plot or a box and whiskers plot. In this 5-number summary, which is at the bottom of the page, you got to come into the test with this memorized. A very good skill is called a data dump, so that as soon as you walk into the test and I see that your scratch paper is clear of markings, then you can dump everything inside of your brain out on that paper so you're not worried about forgetting it. This is definitely something I would dump on the paper, and I would know how to use numbers to create a box and whisker graph, a box plot. Also, you need to know those percentages that we talked about for Q1 and Q3 being the 25%, 50% up to Q2, and 75% up to Q3. Maybe you've never tried using flashcards to study. This would be a great idea. You could put the 5-number summary on one side and all the details on the other side. We did not do lesson 7A or 7B, so they will not be on our test. Neither will 7C or 7D. Those are not on our test. But, oh, nope, 8A is not on there either, and neither is 8B. But now we're back. 8C is on our test. 8C you may or may not have already done in class, but it's coming up that on 8C, we're talking about risk. And when you're looking at a group and you're looking at percentages where it's talking 40% or 10%, and if you observe 500 people, what can that mean of 40% of that 500 or 10% of that 500? What can you do with those numbers? Can you even put them on a bar graph and talk about them? If you're given certain information, can you add, subtract, multiply, or divide to get the remaining information? You're going to do this in class. The same thing on 8D, it's just a continuation of 8C, but it also is bringing back in absolute and relative change. Those are two that you should be ready for on all of our tests. Absolute change is a formula I would write down when I data dump, ending number minus beginning number. And then I would also write down relative change, it's ending number minus beginning number divided by beginning number. And go ahead and multiply it by 100 to get that decimal over to a percent. Looking at 9A, we're talking more about risk management, more about percentages, more about conversions from decimals to percentages, but also two-way tables. And looking at a two-way table, you've got to be able to complete a two-way table, but then also to talk intelligently about the table and how to know. Let me back up to the objectives. Right here, that percentages involve a numerator, which is a comparison value, over a denominator, the base value. That's another thing I would data dump as soon as I get the test to remind myself what goes in the numerator and what goes in the denominator. You're going to have a lot of practice in class with this about comparing information from different people to see who is telling the truth or not, and come to find out they're all telling the truth. They're just using different bases. And in a silly way, it really is all about the base. There will be more of this as you go into this next lesson, looking at pie charts. The base is the entire chart, and then the comparison value or the parts are the slices of pie. And you'll talk about this in class. We'll talk about more percentages. We'll talk about finding those percentages based on information. And we're going to keep going on this risk taking, this trusting the test, looking more at two-way tables. So you get the idea that there probably will be several two-way tables on this next test. And then you'll be talking about these last two lessons, sensitivity, specificity. And if you go on to this next lesson, at the end of it, it's talking about false negatives and false positives. So make sure while you're in class, you're writing this information down, as well as possibly making flashcards or some kind of Google Doc to have everything in front of you. And nope, 10A is not on this test. So I'll just kind of sit here at a blank page or blank part and say, in class, we're also going to talk about proportions, and we're going to highlight proportions, and we're going to highlight dimensional analysis. So I highly encourage you, if you haven't already gone to the tutoring center, set up some appointments or just walk in. You can go to any of our campuses for tutoring, and I have office hours, I have email, you have many resources. Some people use Google, or they search in YouTube, or they use purplemath.com or Khan Academy, Khan. You need to find something that you like and that works for you and that makes sense for you, and then use it, but also have some backups, like people in our classroom. Set up some study times, set up some groups, set up some group chats. Use your resources, study smarter, and I wish you the best getting ready for test 2.